Earl. Pick up your feet.
Now, I don't understand why I can't sleep through the Prescott's vacation photos at home.
Because come this fall, after our Colombian cruise, you're going to want to show up all your photos, and you're going to want Duke to come over and take his nap. Now, put a smile on.
They do this every year. They always have to best us. Have to take a better vacation. Go somewhere more expensive. One of these years, we're gonna take the ultimate vacation. Let's see how they top that.
The cruise, dear. That's our ultimate vacation. You have it all planned out, but do remember, it is not a competition.
No? Then what's this little reconnaissance mission that we are on?
Hush.
Joyce, Earl, come in. Oh, so glad you could make it. Can I offer you something to drink? Tea, perhaps. Duke has this wonderful vintage he saved from the Boston Harbor.
Here we go.
We'd love tea.
Duke, the Hendersons are here. They call it the Revolutionary War, but I think the real revolution is the invention of soap.
Indeed. I was just saying to Earl the other day when we went west with Louis, and
Here's your tea. Now, put plenty of sugar in it. It's bitter, but genuine.
Bitter, but genuine. Just like the hostess.
That was a good one.
I'll go see what's keeping Duke.
why didn't you say something?
You kicked me for saying something.
I kicked you for being rude. Why didn't you say anything when she interrupted my story about the soap?
You have a story about soap.
You remember that when I had...
Duke's on his way.
So, honey, how was the colonies? Did you stop at that postcard shop I read about? The one where you can take a selfie as Paul Revere rides by?
Well, I think...
Earl, Joyce, so glad you could come. How's the tea? Did Honey give you the bad news?
Bad news.
Oh, he's exaggerating.
You were pretty exaggerated when I told you the travel agency rules. No technology newer than 1800.
So no pictures.
Oh, honey, how distressing. We were so looking forward to them.
Don't worry. I found a loophole.
She hired somebody. I had to pay his way so he could document our every move.
He took nearly 250,000 pictures.
How perfectly marvelous. Where do you keep them all?
Well, that's the bad news. It appears in my haste, I hired one of those 20th century photographers who does everything on film. He says it's going to take a whole year to develop them.
He took nearly 250,000 pictures on film.
Oh, honey, we completely understand. Back when we were young and foolish, we went to the roaring 20s, found an absolute genius. He took all our photos, went back to his lab, said it took about a year developing the film, and then he put them in a safe deposit box in our name. When we got back, all our photos were there.
Well, I suggested something like that, but apparently not even time travel can hurry Ansel Adams.
The landscape photographer.
But Boston is beautiful in 76.
Especially with us in the foreground.
Oh, honey, we came to hear about Boston. You know, was it everything they say, all the massacres and the combing out of lice?
The revolution was incredible. Why? We even got to watch Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. So inspirational.
They just don't make men like Tom Jefferson no more.
Only natural.
Earl, don't.
You know, meeting Thomas Jefferson, I came home changed.
She came home and changed the drapes.
Colonial lace?
Uh-huh.
Earl, don't be like that. We should change the drapes.
Now, what's wrong with Dolly Madison's drapes?
Say, Pilgrim, what did you mean about no men like Thomas Jefferson anymore?
There's no men like Tom Jefferson no more. On account of there's no great war or crisis or scientific discovery to be made.
Oh.
It's hard to be a general when every war has already been fought. It's hard to be a statesman when every crisis has been solved. It's hard to be a scientist when everything's already been discovered. We live in a boring point in time when all the Tom Jeffersons and the like have cut out to more interesting times.
Earl, that's insulting. You'll have to forgive.
Earl, that's genius. How'd you come up with that?
A schoolmate of mine, ugly kid,
Oh.
poor too. He did all of his Euclid on the back of envelopes and talked about self-evident truths and the like. Then one day, he up and disappeared.
Oh.
I figured he had moved, but the neighbor girl found his picture in a history book. It was a real daguerreotype, dated 1846, the first known photograph of the Abraham Lincoln.
No.
Yes.
Earl, that's excellent. I'm going to use it. You know, that explains something to me.
What's that?
Ever wonder why we don't see anyone from the future vacationing in our time?
Oh, Duke, don't start up with that end of the world nonsense again. He thinks something awful's gonna happen, like a nuclear war, or an epidemic, or the earth is invaded by aliens.
Uh-huh.
Well, I always figured time travel gets outlawed by the government.
No, no, no! As someone that went to school with Abraham Lincoln, you ought to realize it.
Realize what?
We're too boring.
Oh, Duke, don't be cynical.
Now, we live in flyover country, honey. Nothing ever happens here. All the Abraham Lincolns and Thomas Jeffersons have gone on to more exciting times. Nothing exciting ever happens here. We live after the end of history.
Oh, honey, photos or no, we want to hear about Boston.
Well, there's really not much to say.
We got scooped.
Oh, Duke, don't call it that. He's teasing.
Scooped!
We hadn't been in Boston but 2 days when we ran into the Bodwells.
The Bodwells? I didn't think they could afford Boston in 76.
Well, our Bodwells can, but these weren't our Bodwells. The girls were all grown up. They were like 10 years older than our Bodwells.
Yep, it seems they get an inheritance or win the lottery or something, and then they splurge it on a grand history tour.
Well, they told me that they was saving up for that. Scrimping.
Well, all I know is at this very moment, in that shabby little house down the street, they are compiling a list of all of the best times to visit anywhere in the world.
In the world?
Well, I think they meant the East Coast.
Say, do they ever visit the old neighborhood? It's not all shambles by then, is it?
Are you kidding? Honey wouldn't tell them one word about when we left, not the way they kept complimenting her on how well her looks are holding up.
Well, I'm afraid we must be going. Honey, thank you so much for the invitation, and Duke, thank you for the tea.
Well, you're not leaving.
I'm afraid we must, if Earl doesn't get his nap.
Earl, lead to bed, and Earl, lead to rise, as our friend Benny would say.
Wasn't Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia in 76?
Yes, with Thomas Jefferson. Come on now, dear.
But the choice. you didn't get a chance to tell us about that Colombian cruise you're going to take next fall. Are you learning Spanish?
This fall, dear, and Columbus was Italian. Do invite us back when your Boston Polaroids come in.
Well, of course, of course. And listen, I'm so glad you enjoyed the tea. If you want more, just ask. Duke squeezed out more of that awful harbor water than I can drink in a year.
I did that. Bye now. You told them about our cruise?
Of course not. After all that time I spent investigating the travel agencies to make sure they couldn't go somewhere earlier.
They did go somewhere earlier. They only skimmed through Boston on the way back through the 1600s. That photo was of them giving John Smith a cigarette in a canoe.
They went to Jamestown? I knew they didn't meet Thomas Jefferson. They hardly sounded all liberty, equality, and fraternity to me.
They knew we saw off Lewis and Clark last fall, and that we expected them to visit the Revolution. But instead of letting us have an easy French and Indian War, they skipped through pre-revolutionary America entirely. They upped the budget.
Isn't that why you wanted the Colombian cruise?
Oh, hush, I still think you let something slip.
I'm sure it was the Bodwells.
The Bodwells, them and their world history tour. It's just not fair. A Colombian cruise just doesn't cut it anymore. Is it too late to change our plans? You know, Columbus wasn't the first person to visit America. We could take a Viking cruise.
But you hate the cold.
Don't be absurd, dear. Our vacations aren't about me.